Hey, welcome to HSM. House groups, it's good to see you guys out there. Orange Villa Park, Placentia Fullerton, Park Rapids, Minnesota, Bellflower, and even your Belinda, who I did not forget this time. Hey, today we're doing a little bit of HSM on the road, and we're taking off on this series called Marked. And when I thought of that series, when we thought of the series together, I thought about this place that I ran across about 1.5 years ago, and I thought, oh, this would be a super dope place to do a teaching video sometime, because this place is marked with all kinds of graffiti. It's this really cool building that I wandered through at one point in time. And then today, Christian and I walked out here, and this glorious building, they tore it down. But let me just show you what it looked like. How about this, huh? Pretty cool graffiti, some pretty cool spots to look at. Before we jump all the way into today, I want to give you a little HSM update. Now, most of you probably already know that as you watch this, our previous HSM pastor, Landon, now finds himself in the wild and wacky state of Texas, working at his dad's church. And that leaves some of you wondering, does this mean that we have to watch Scott on these videos now? His biceps are so much smaller than Landon's, and he's like double Landon's age. He could fall over and die right during a video, which I guess is possible, but that would be must-see TV, wouldn't it? Now, I got 2 bits of good news for you. Number 1, I am not the long-time answer for an HSM pastor. I'm still gonna be here, but I know this because I'm responsible for searching the world for a fantastic HSM pastor to hire, and I'm pretty picky because I feel like you guys are awesome and you deserve the best. So you can feel free to pray for me while we're doing that search. Number 2, in the meantime, I'll be like the substitute teacher, right? But hopefully not the one who everybody just makes fun of all day. That'd be a drag. Hopefully I'll be like the cool substitute. I'll try anyway. Some of you guys know, before I got here, I got to talk to teenagers in Chicago about Jesus for many years. Back to high-waisted jeans were cool the first time around, and Tom Brady was a rookie quarterback. So even though I'm old and not that cool, hopefully I'll be able to say some things that'll be helpful in these next few weeks. But enough about that. I want to jump further into the series. And if you were at Together Night last week, which I hope you were, you know we talked about marks that you're born with. And not just physically, but kind of like the way that you are. Are you outgoing or shy? Are you competitive or are you more chill about that kind of stuff? Are you super smart? Or are you like super average intelligence? And we used a metaphor, like a comparison for those of you who don't pay attention to English class. And we talked about birthmarks, marks you're born with. That's clever, huh? Birthmarks. So if you were Together Night, you saw some of that. But this week we're moving on because some of the marks that we end up with are because of choices that we make. And I've got a new metaphor for you, not birthmarks. We're moving on to illustrate marks that you choose. And I like this one. It's a tattoo. A tattoo, marks you choose. Because some tattoos are great and people are super glad they got them, right? And other tattoos, they just make you wonder, what was that person thinking? Now, I bet you know someone with a great tattoo, so I want to ask you to take 60 seconds, tell the person next to you what's the best tattoo you've ever seen, or maybe the worst. Right now, best or worst, tell somebody. Now, I wish I could have heard some of those stories, or even better, I wish I could have seen some of those terrible tattoos that you're talking about. But think about this. Some tattoos, they have great meaning, and people wear them with pride. But I've also met people who didn't give a lot of thought to their tattoo. I've heard people tell stories like this. I was drunk, I was with some buddies, and we all decided to get tattoos. And I say, what does it mean? Like, what does that symbolize? And they say, I can't really remember, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. Or, I used to really like Scooby-Doo, so I got this giant Scooby-Doo tattoo right here on my neck. Not so much anymore. And you're gonna think I'm making this up, but I'm not. One of my favorite stories from a guy I knew in college, He was in love with this girl named Jill. Oh man, he was crazy about it. And he was totally sure that he was gonna marry her. So he got his name tattooed right on his forearm. Can you guess whether they got married? You're right, they did not. They did not. Let me show you a couple other, what I would call regretful tattoos. I don't know if there's any football fans out there, but someone thought that this tattoo looked like the Patriots logo. I don't think so. Check this one out. This is a tattoo on the back of a guy's head, and he was so committed, he even filled in like the mustache with hair. Pretty gross and pretty weird. And then I don't know about you, and again, I'm not trying to be judgy, but face tattoos always kind of confuse me. I mean, maybe a little bit, but gosh, for my preference, just a little bit overboard. Now, I'm not here to judge tattoos because a lot of tattoos can be super cool. And here's one of the things I love about tattoos too. Oftentimes people can tell a story of something that's got great meaning to them. And they chose that tattoo, that mark, because it's so meaningful to them, and they'd never change it. When my middle school son went to college, he asked me if I wanted to get a tattoo, like him and I get the same tattoo to kind of commemorate the years of his growing up years together. And I'll show you this right here. My last name's Ruben, so that's an R. I told you my biceps were smaller than Landon's. The 5 is for 5 people in our family, and then this is the state of Illinois where he grew up, and then down below that is Michigan where he went to college. Now, I show you this to emphasize a couple of things, all right? And I want you to think about tattoos this way. As you get older, you've got more and more freedom to choose things for yourself. Now, some choices don't have long-range effects, like your haircut or what clothes you picked to wear this morning. You can undo those kind of things pretty quickly. But some other choices that you get to choose have long-term implications that you might wish you could unchoose, but it's pretty hard to do. Now, when we're talking about making choices, I want to ask you to look with me at 4 words that come out of a slice of history from the Bible that you might have heard of before. You've probably heard of this story, but I want you to hone in on these 4 words. Let me set it up first. There was a guy named Daniel, and his story is told in the book of Daniel. Pretty cool to have a book in the Bible named after you, but that's the truth for Daniel. Now, I'm going to try and condense a long story. About 6 years before Jesus lived, there was this gigantic and powerful nation called Babylon. And they were like a superpower. And they invaded the city of Jerusalem, and they conquered the people of Jerusalem, because I guess that's what you can do when you're a superpower. And they took a bunch of their stuff, and they took a bunch of their money, and then they even took a bunch of their people and enslaved them. Because the king of Babylon, he wanted more fighters in his army, I guess, so he could go conquer more countries and stay super powerful. And so he told his army to go capture some of the best young men from Judah and Jerusalem, and essentially start to convert them over to his nation. To his culture, to his army, and that's where Daniel comes in. You might have heard us talk about Daniel before, somewhere in HSM life or somewhere in your church life, but Daniel and 3 of his buddies were some of the guys who got captured, and you may have heard of them. His friends were named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and later on in the book of Daniel, it's recorded they got thrown into a furnace of fire for not bowing down to a gigantic statue of the king. Not talking about that story today, but God protected them. They didn't burn up in that furnace, and it's pretty amazing. But this king, the same king, he was amazed. I mean, who wouldn't be? And he got curious about this God that Daniel followed. But all that didn't just happen, Here's what I mean. When Daniel and his buddies first got captured, as prisoners, they didn't get to pick the food they ate. You know, there was no prisoner menu of hey, what would you want today? But the food that the Babylonians ate was viewed as unclean by Daniel and the people of God. And so Daniel decided that even if everyone else was eating this rich food that the Babylonians gave them, he wasn't going to do it. He was going to honor God with his diet. And so he decided ahead of time. It wasn't a choice that he made in the moment, hoping he'd be strong enough to stand up to the king who could have him killed at any moment. But here's what the verse says. It says, Daniel made up his mind. Made up his mind. Those are the 4 words. Not to defile himself by eating the food and wine given to him by the king. Now, it turns out eating the way that God commanded Daniel's people actually made them stronger and healthier than all the other young guys in the army. But it goes back to those 4 words. Daniel made up his mind ahead of time. Before the stress came, he knew what he was going to stand for. He decided. Now, why am I telling you that? I think you probably got an idea. Did you ever feel like the world around you is going a little crazy and maybe the current is just dragging people along? Is there anything in your life that you need to make up your mind about before a situation arises, even if everybody else is doing something else. Now, I want to be clear. This isn't about good behavior points. This is actually about, could God's ways actually be better? And is there anything you want to make up your mind about ahead of time? Let me give you some examples. Making your mind up about what your time limit is before you get sucked into your online world for hours on end. Making your mind up about what you'll say before the moment somebody passes you something to smoke or something to drink that you're not comfortable with. Making your mind up what you'll do before the urge strikes you to revisit that porn site. Making your mind up what your physical boundaries are going to be with that guy or that girl. What do you need to make up your mind about ahead of time? Now, right now, I predict that some of you guys are thinking, come on, Scott, you old man. Nobody does that. And that's exactly what people would have said in Daniel's time. You see, in Daniel's case, it actually saved his life to make up his mind ahead of time. And it did more than once. Now, for me, deciding things ahead of time has spared me a lot of pain when I've done it well. And other times, when I've just let drift kind of take charge and go where life flows or go where everyone else is doing something, I've hit some pain that I wish I could take back. I want to give you one last thought about these marks that people choose. When Jesus was killed on the cross, he made a choice. He made up his mind ahead of time. He chose the nail marks that were going to pierce his hands. He could have stopped that crucifixion at any moment, but he chose it, you guys, because he knew what it would take to pay for my sins and to pay for your sins and to make us right with God. He made up his mind ahead of time. He knew. So in this moment, I'm curious. Is there anything that you can think of that you need to make up your mind about? Again, not for good behavior points, but because God's way might be the best way, even if it's harder. We're gonna have a chance to talk about it in small groups, but it's not like some kind of a mass confessional. You don't have to be too specific about anything if that feels too risky to you. It's more to talk about what stops us from making up our minds ahead of time, even when we know that the decision is a good one, even if it's harder. Hey, I'm proud of you guys, not just for coming to HSM, but for engaging your brain in this stuff. Can I be honest? Not enough people think deeply about stuff like this. And I'm not just talking about students. There are a ton of adults whose lives would be better if they just make up their mind about something crucial in their life, even if it's hard. So way to go. Have a great conversation. We love you, and we will see you next week.